This is the only group, conventional loans, that do not leave the decision on whether or not to change the scope of work up to the appraiser.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast.
Minisode.
Welcome back to another mini-sode. Dustin Harris hanging out in the podcast chair. Holy cow, what a crazy world we live in, folks. I want to help my fellow appraisers today. Lots and lots of questions about inspections and what's allowed and what's not allowed, and when can I do an exterior, and when can I do a desktop, and when do I have to do an interior. Folks, I'm going to break it down for you today. I'm going to break it down with Fannie Mae, FHA HUD, and the Veterans Administration. Hang tight. I want to pause here and remind you that we are sponsored by ANOW Software, folks. ANOW is the way that I manage and take care of my appraisal business, and I can tell you within a couple of seconds how we're doing each month because of the analytics tool in ANOW. It's awesome. Check them out. Go to anow.com. Again, it's anow.com. All right, folks, lots and lots of changes. I am recording this on Monday, the 30th of March, 2020. And the reason I give you the date is a lot of times, as you know, I record these well in advance. We're kind of switching things up right now as far as when we record things for obvious reasons. There's lots and lots of questions that appraisers have. There's a moving needle every day, every hour almost, with this COVID-19 pandemic and some of the changes that are happening with appraisals. And I want to keep my appraisers up to date, my listeners up to date on what's going on. And I have created an inspections cheat sheet that I just want to go through. Now, I want to caveat this to begin with. In fact, I reached out to one of my fellow appraisers over the weekend, and we were just chatting about different things. And one of the things that he said to me was the waters are extremely muddy right now, and I completely agree. All of us are trying to wade through the paperwork, the legalese. I mean, there are circulars out there. We've got Lender Letter LL 2020-04 from Fannie Mae. We've got Mortgage Letter 2020-05 from FHA. We've got Circular 26-2011 from VA, and each of them are different. And each of them have their own protocol. And folks, guess what? They have the right to do that. Fannie Mae can do what Fannie Mae does. Freddie Mac can do what Freddie Mac does. FHA HUD can do what FHA HUD does. And VA, of course, can do what VA does. And as a consequence, these groups have not really gotten together to make a decision on how to proceed during this national emergency, during this pandemic, as far as what will be allowed and what will not be allowed regarding appraisals. As a consequence, it makes it very, very hard to understand what is allowed, what is not allowed, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. Now, I'm going to try to break it down today, but I want to give a major caveat, okay? Here's my CYA. Ready? I don't know what the hell is going on out there, just like you don't either. There's so much changing, there's so much that is difficult to understand that it's a challenge, right? And it's difficult to know exactly what to do. And so I wanted to break it down, but here's the caveat, folks. This is subject to change. This is subject to interpretation. What I'm giving you is my best guess, to be honest with you. Now, I will tell you this. I have gone through each of these circulars and letters very, very carefully. And I've read and reread, and I've used the find function to search for different keywords. And I've written this cheat sheet and gone back after I wrote it and made sure, okay, did I get this right? Okay. That being said, I would love to hear your comments. I would love to hear your feedback if you read things different than I do. Okay. This, I guess my CYA is this. This is not the definitive end-all be-all for you regarding inspections. When it comes down to it, your business is your business, and you have to decide what you think is best in the current circumstance. Okay? That being said, let me break this down the way that I understand it. Let's first talk about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Okay? So these would be regular conventional loans. These would be purchase refis through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Okay? Here's my understanding. The way I'm going to break this down is I'm going to give on each of these groups. So we're going to go Fannie first, FHA second, and VA third. With each of these groups, I'm going to tell you where an interior, exterior, and desktop can be done. Okay, and I'm going to break that down according to the circulars, according to the letters, at least the way that I read them. And I'm also going to give you some notes with each of these groups. Okay, so take good notes here. Fannie's going to actually be the easiest to do. Okay, it's the least complicated of the three groups. It's also the least appraiser friendly, if I dare say that, okay? And you'll know what I mean as we go through this, okay? Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the way I understand it, according to lender letter LL-2020-04, another CYA here, folks, read the letter, okay? You're responsible to understand the letter, not some schmo with a microphone in front of him, okay? Look it up, lender letter LL-2020-04. Here's my understanding. An interior must be done, okay? Notice I didn't say can be done. I said must be done. An interior must be done, interior inspection on an appraisal. And there's only one bullet point here. When the client orders it based on a detailed matrix. That's it, folks. An interior must be done when it comes to Fannie Mae when it's ordered that way. Okay? You'll understand what I mean as we get into the notes section. Okay? Just follow. Exterior can be done, again, when the client orders it based on a detailed matrix. Number 3, a desktop appraisal. So no exterior, no interior inspection can be done, again, when the client orders it based on a detailed matrix. Now, I know you're all saying, well, Dustin, a lot of good you're doing. You're just referring back to the letter. No, here's the deal. This actually is going to make more sense as we get into FHA and VA. Trust me, okay? Here's the deal. Here's the notes section. This is when it starts to come together. The notes on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on my inspection cheat sheet say this. This is the only group that does not leave the decision up to the appraiser. Let me repeat that. This is the only group, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, this is the only group, conventional loans, that do not leave the decision on whether or not to change the scope of work up to the appraiser. Okay? Let that sink in. That's why I answered the way that I did. When must you do an interior? When it's ordered that way. When can you do an exterior? When it's ordered that way. When can you do a desktop? When it's ordered that way, but it's up to the lender, the client, not the appraiser. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, Dustin, isn't it up to the appraiser to have a scope of work? Right, it is. It is up to you to decide the scope of work. But here's the thing. You can decide not to do the appraisal, and many appraisers are. But with regard to Fannie and Freddie, you cannot get an interior inspection ordered. You can't get an order on your desk for an interior and then decide for yourself that you're not going to do it, that you're going to change the scope of work. You can't even request that they change the scope of work, is my understanding. Okay. Now, I will say this, a couple other notes here. Fannie puts the order of importance as traditional interior inspection first, desktop appraisals second, and then exterior. If you look at the matrix on the letter, you'll see that it comes in the order of importance of what they want first, traditional being first, desktop, believe it or not, being second, and then exterior actually being last. Also, Fannie requires that you use the 1004 and the 1073 forms. Okay, you cannot change to a 2055 form. They state that their portal will not allow the update, and many appraisers interpret that as data cannot be collected using any other form. Okay, if you use those forms, I know what you're saying. Well, Dustin, can you really do an exterior in our desktop on a 1004 and a 1073 form? You do have to put a modified scope of work or modified certification in there. You also need to put the word exterior or desktop in the map reference field. You still are required to get credible data. Okay, we can't move away from USPAP. USPAP still requires that you have data credible enough to do the appraisal properly, make it reliable. Okay, you're going to need to make extraordinary assumptions. And finally, the 1004D finals can be done through a letter and photos from the borrower. That does say that in the circular. Okay, all right. That's Fannie. That's Freddie. Boils down to this: whatever the client orders, you have to do or not. In other words, you cannot change the scope of work as the appraiser, but you can refuse to not do it. Or you can refuse to do it, rather. You can refuse to do it. You can have it reassigned to someone else, okay? You don't have to go into a home if you don't feel comfortable, but you cannot change the scope of work like the other two groups that we're going to talk about today will allow you to do. I want to pause here and remind you of a great company called ANOW Software. Now, folks, ANOW was developed by appraisers for appraisers. Marty, up in Canada, actually, an appraiser up in Canada, needed a tool to keep track of all of his orders, needed a tool to track his business, and that tool was ANOW Software. That tool has been modified and upgraded and improved over the years to where it is the quintessential way to keep track of your appraisal world, your appraisal business, your appraisals, step by step. Check it out. Go to anow.com. It's ANOW.com. All right, folks, we are back. We're talking today about inspections. We've already talked about Fannie and Freddie. I want to move on to a couple of other groups. Let's talk about FHA HUD. Now, this comes from a mortgage letter dated March 27th, 2020. And the mortgage letter, if you want to look it up, if you want to Google it, is 2020-05. 2020-05. Very simple, okay? Mortgage letter 2020-05. And you can read through this, and I highly recommend, highly encourage that you read through it, that you don't just take my word for it. This is my interpretation of very difficult language to understand, okay? I've tried to break it down into what I call a cheat sheet, an inspection cheat sheet. This is a cheat sheet that I'm giving to my appraisal office, okay, those that set up appointments. It's also a cheat sheet that I'm giving to my all-star team that breaks it down, makes it very easy to understand. It's a little challenging over audio, I get it, but if you're taking good notes, hopefully it will come through, okay? All right, interiors for FHA HUD must be done, okay? Notice the word must. Number one, for new constructions. All new constructions with FHA HUD still has to be an interior inspection. Number two, for building on own land programs. Number three, for all 203K purchases and refi. Well, what's a 203K, Dustin? Well, if you do FHA HUD, you're going to know and understand what a 203K is. Okay, for purchases and refinances with a 203K, must have an interior inspection. And for cash out refinances. Okay, that's a big one. Interiors must still be done for cash out refinances. Okay, when can an exterior be done for FHA HUD? Number one, for traditional refinances where it is not safe or in areas restricted by authorities. And basically what that means is if you've got somebody sick in the property, or it's not safe for whatever reason, or you are in a stay-at-home state, quarantine state, if you will, those states that have been deemed by the governor or mayors or county officials. I mean, this is happening on different municipalities. If you are restricted by authorities from going out for traditional refinances, you can do an exterior for HUD FHA. You can also do this for reverse mortgages in the same situation, and you can also do this for purchases, okay, in the same situation, okay? And when I say in the same situation, what I'm talking about, of course, is where it's not safe or there's sickness, okay, or in areas restricted by authorities, okay? So for traditional refinances, reverse mortgages, or purchases where it's not safe, or areas that are situations, rather, where authorities have said, don't go out, okay? Desktops, the exact same thing, okay? FHA HUD does not make the determination whether to do an exterior or a desktop. Let me repeat that. FHA HUD in their letter, the way I read it, does not determine which one to do. If you're not going to do an interior, it does not say must do an exterior or must do a desktop. Okay? It simply says if you can't do an interior for these reasons, it's not safe or it's restricted by authorities, you can change the scope of work to an exterior or a desktop. Again, it doesn't indicate which one for which situation, the way I understand it, okay? Let me give you a couple of notes. This is an exact quote from the letter. Quote, when applicable, the appraiser may amend the scope of work to perform an exterior only or a desktop only, end quote, okay? When applicable, and we talked about which ones were applicable, the appraiser may amend the scope of work, okay? That's the difference between FHA and Fannie. Fannie does not allow the appraiser to amend the scope of work. The appraiser can simply choose not to do the appraisal. In this situation, if it meets the criteria above, the appraiser may amend the scope of work. Okay. Further on the notes, you must continue to use the 1004 and the 1073 forms. Again, just like we talked about with Fannie, you would put the word exterior or desktop in the map reference field. That's that field on the top of page 1 up in the subject area. Okay, where it says map reference, you're going to put the word exterior, you're going to put the word desktop. Again, you still have to get credible data. You still have to make a lot of extraordinary assumptions. Okay, you've got to complete this report as is. Okay, so a lot of questions. Well, Dustin, the reason you do an interior with an FHA is that you're looking for health and safety issues. Yeah. In this case, because of the national emergency, FHA HUD says you have to complete the report as is unless you actually observe NPR issues from the street or in some other way. Okay. So maybe you've got interior photos that you've gathered, for example, from the point of contact. Maybe the borrower walks through the property with Zoom or FaceTime or something like that and films each of the rooms and takes pictures, and you notice that there's NPR issues. Obviously, you're going to put those into the report, and you're going to complete it subject to those being fixed. But for the most part, we're probably going to be completing these reports as is, unless you observe those NPR issues in some other way, okay? You've got to insert the modified certifications. Let me repeat that. There is a modified set of certifications. You can find it by going to Mortgage Letter 2020-05 and then scroll down, and there is a link inside the letter for the modified certifications. You've got to put those in your report, okay? And they also note that 1004Ds or finals can be done through a letter and photos from the borrower. Okay, so if you've got a report, for example, that you completed last month and it had NPR issues, rather than going out and going into that property and putting yourself and them at risk, you can simply do a letter from the borrower and pictures and then make an extraordinary assumption. Okay, lots of extraordinary assumptions here. Okay, finally, let's talk about VA. And by the way, hats off to VA. Once again, they lead in their trust of appraisers, in their trust of veterans, and their desire to protect both. Okay, let me just say that. This comes from Circular 26-20-11, dated March 27th, 2020. Interior inspections for VA must be done, number one, for purchases where the home is vacant, okay, except in areas which are restricted by authorities. Okay, so if you live in a stay-at-home state, for example, you can still do exteriors for purchases, even if it's vacant. Okay, number two, for purchases or refinance where occupied, okay, hold on, let me keep going, except in areas which are restricted by authorities or where someone is sick, or if either party agree that an interior is not a good idea. Let me repeat that. Or if either, now these are my words, not theirs, but this is me reading the letter. It makes it very clear that either party can say, this is not a good idea. You want to come in my house? Are you crazy? Right? Either party, including the appraiser, can make a decision on this of whether or not an interior is a good idea. Okay? So interiors must be done for purchases or for refinances. Okay? For purchases where vacant, except in restricted areas. Okay? Makes sense. Or purchases or refis where occupied, except in areas that are restricted by authorities, where someone is sick, or if either party decide it's not a good idea. Okay? Exterior inspections for VAs can be done, number one, in areas which are restricted by authorities. Okay. Number two, in areas which are restricted by authorities where someone is sick, or if either party agree an interior inspection is not a good idea, or all liquidation and servicer appraisals. These are now 2055 only. Okay. And finally, desktops can be done when the lender assigns it and the appraiser agrees. Okay, let me repeat that. Desktop appraisals for VA are only done not because the appraiser chooses to do a desktop. Okay, VA is asking you to do an exterior inspection, okay, unless the lender assigns it and, of course, the appraiser agrees to do it. Okay, so a couple of notes. This isn't a direct quote from the letter. Quote, the appraiser will always determine the scope of work for the assignment. This is my favorite sentence of all the letters and all the circulars that I've read this last week. This is my favorite sentence. I'm crocheting it and putting it on my wall. Okay, thank you, VA, for this statement. I'm going to say it one more time. Quote, the appraiser will always determine the scope of work for the assignment. Thank you, VA. Okay, another quote, lenders may not direct the appraiser to conduct an interior inspection. Once again, thank you, VA, for having our backs. Okay, a couple other notes, can use the 2055 and 1075 forms. I love this, but remember, get as much credible data as possible. Even though you're using a 2055 form for VA, it still might be a good idea to talk to the borrower, to have them film, to have them send you pictures, what have you. Okay, a couple other notes, boldly say, quote, per Department of Veterans Affairs, no interior inspection was provided due to COVID-19. Okay, that's a direct statement that you should put on your reports if you're not doing an interior during this crisis. And by the way, VA, from what I could find, said nothing about doing 1004Ds through a letter of orders from the borrower. I'm going to leave that up to you for your interpretation. But I'm thinking, well, I'll just give you my opinion. If VA is allowing us to do exteriors and desktops and allow us to be able to change the scope of work from an interior to an exterior, I can't imagine that they wouldn't also be okay with a letter and photos from the borrower on the repairs that are needed. Okay, that's it, folks. That's the summary, the way I understand it, and I'm certainly open to your interpretations as well. But that's the summary as I understand it with the changes regarding COVID-19, the pandemic that we're all experiencing right now when it comes to appraisals for Fannie Mae, FHA, and VA. Have broken it down for you. And by the way, I've made this very, very, very easy to understand in my inspections cheat sheet. Okay, it is part of the All-Star team. By the way, the All-Star team has never been more active. I think appraisers get it when it comes to the All-Star team right now. They understand how important it is to be surrounded by like-minded, positive appraisers who are helping each other through this crisis. It is so cool to see. This is what the All-Star team was developed for. This is it, folks. It is a community of like-minded, positive appraisers who are out there helping each other. By the way, you can belong to the All-Star team right now for free, F-R-E-E, okay? For free. Did I say for free? I said for free. You can belong to the All-Star team for free right now. You simply need to go to my website, theappraisercoach.com. and go to memberships and sign up. And during the sign up process, you'll be asked for a coupon code. Ready? Write this down. The coupon code is COVID-19, COVID, 19, no dash, no space. COVID-19 is the coupon code, and it will give you 30 days free of the All-Star team. Absolutely no requirements. And that is full unfettered access to everything I've got. That's all my webinars. That's all the great conversation that's happening in the private Facebook group right now. This is the members resource library. All of it is completely free and open to you for 30 days with a COVID-19 coupon. I hope you will join us, folks. And by the way, this cheat sheet is available on the All-Star team right now. Okay, I posted it on Monday. when this was recorded. This will come out on Wednesday. You can get access to it and have your own cheat sheet. And by the way, you can modify it and do whatever you want to it, but this breaks it down, makes it very easy, a visual, if you will. You can give it to your office manager. You can use it yourself to know when an inspection is required, when an exterior, when a desktop for each of these groups. It's available to you on the All-Star team. Thank you for joining me, folks. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.